new refreshment in the back as well.
Hey, so my name's Jess. Should I start now?
Yeah, for me you can start. Yeah,
okay,
please.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I'd like to talk about lifecycle methods in React, and why is that? Well, yeah, I think they can be a bit confusing for one, and also there's some changes happening. Some changes for React 17. But before I get into that, how many people have used React here? Okay, nice, nearly everyone. Yeah. How many people use it every day? And how many people still need to migrate to the new methods for React 17? Yeah, I need to do that as well. Yeah. Okay, so just in case anyone doesn't know here, React is JavaScript library. So it compiles the JavaScript, but it's a way to create components that combine HTML and JavaScript to make websites built in a modular fashion so you're not repeating yourself. And who am I? I'm Jess, I'm British, as you can tell from my accent, and I started working in a startup about 5 years ago in a marketing role, and I got interested in coding then, so I used Codecademy, Udemy, blah blah blah, teach myself online, and then I decided to go and do a boot camp here in Amsterdam because it was a lot cheaper than doing it back home in London. And then I did Rails Girls Summer of Code. That's a really good program. It's to get more women into technology. So I got funded for 3 months to work on an open source project, and it works in a very similar way to Google Summer of Code. So if anyone has questions about that, please ask me as well. And now I've worked for about 1 year as a React developer at an agency called Info39, and we're hiring JavaScript developers, so if you're interested in a move, please talk to me about that as well. We get 30 days of holiday, a nice healthy lunch, hack time, blah blah.
Do you pay salary?
Or just
Yeah. Oh, you don't need a salary. It's so much fun. Yeah. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. What are React lifecycle methods and how they're used, and what's changing in React 17. Okay, so audience participation. What is a lifecycle method? Anyone can tell me? Don't be shy. Lifecycle method?
The way the components, stateful components update when actually the properties change and whatever stuff happens.
Yeah. Like, I think it's the easiest way to think of it for me was like, okay, so a method is a function that's just inbuilt, so you don't have to define it; it's already there. And they call it a lifecycle method because it's about the life cycle of the component, when it mounts, when it receives new props and state, and when it unmounts. Okay, and what's changing in React 17? So we've got some new methods, and we've also got some old methods being deprecated. And the reason for that is that React is going to start rendering asynchronously. So that's going to have consequences on which methods we can use safely. Okay, so these are all the lifecycle methods. As you can see, it's these will ones that are going to be deprecated. And that's because React is going to start working in an asynchronous way. We can no longer be sure that like will mount is going to happen before the mount, or will receive props is going to actually fire before they receive props, or will update is actually going to happen before the update. Okay. And this nice diagram shows you the whole overview of the life cycle and all the methods. So these are all the new methods that are there for React 17. So I'm going to dive into each method a bit more later, but just to give you an overview, you've got the mounting phase and the constructor, then get derived state from props. That's in both the mounting phase and the updating. That's one of the new methods. Then we have the render component did mount, should component update, then the re-render with new props, new state, and then get snapshot before update, did update, and then unmounting phase, component will unmount.
nice.
Yeah. Here are the old deprecated methods. So I want to show you this slide just so you can put it all in context, understand how those are used, and so understand how to replace them, basically. So component will mount, that's not used that often, to be honest. It's called just after the constructor. Component will receive props is used a lot more. That's when the component updates. and will update, that's called just before the render. So we're going to kind of focus mostly on component will receive props when it comes to getting to grips with React 17 and the new methods. Okie dokie. What is props and what is state? Who can tell me what's props and what's state?
Props you get from the parent states in the component.
Nice, yeah. So I think, I always think, okay, state is something that changes when the user interacts. So maybe you've got a little pop-up and then your user like clicks open, close, and then the state is set to open to close in response to the user. Props is just, yeah, from parent to child, so that's not going to change. Maybe I want to have a green UI, so I'm going to pass a prop called background color, set it to green to my child, but that's not going to be changed by the user. Okay, so component will mount. This is called just after the constructor. And to be honest, it's not really used very often anyway. It's going to be deprecated, and to be honest, you should just be able to do your functionality in your constructor function. Okay, and component will receive props. This one is used a lot more. It's called when the component updates. Also going to be deprecated. So basically you want to call this when maybe you've got a big UI and you've got props that are changing, and you need to make sure a downstream change happens in response to those props. So maybe, for example, you've got like a car booking app, and the user selects a time, so maybe they're checking on Saturday, okay, and then there's a downstream prop that's like, okay, a downstream component that's like, okay, what's changing there? And then you've got a new, yeah, maybe select a new time, so let's actually have a look on Wednesday, and then, okay, new props are coming in, so you've got to update that car list and just show the available ones on Wednesday. Okay, yeah, going to be deprecated, but we're going to have a look at what you can replace it with. Usually it's going to be component did update, but there are some cases where you might want to use get derived state from props as well. Okay, should component update. Can anyone guess what this does?
Should component update or not?
Yes,
Yeah.
very good.
Need to return true or false.
Yeah.
You get a lot of
Yeah.
false.
So maybe you're worried about performance, you don't want to do loads of pointless re-renders, so maybe you would set this to false if you're worried about performance. But you can also set it to true or false in some props. So maybe you've got loads of props, but oh, actually this is an important one that you need to update. So you can set that prop to true and then everything else is false. Okay, will update. So this is called just before the re-render, and it's going to be deprecated. To be honest, yeah, it's not really used very often, and you should be able to just use component did update instead. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about that, really. Component did mount. Anyone?
After it mount, right?
Yep, when it has
Render is
mounted.
random, yeah.
Yeah, so after the render happens. And why do you want to use that? So the classic example is you're calling an API, and that data isn't going to be returned before your render happens. So you wait until your component is rendered, then okay, it did mount, okay, now I've got my data, and then I'm going to inject it in. But this one isn't changing. This one, yeah, it's not a new method and it's not being deprecated, but I thought it's kind of nice to show you the context. So
Is it
cover all of
really
them.
runs on after unmount?
Sorry?
Is it really runs after unmount?
Yes, no, so it's after the first render it's
The
mounted.
render.
Yeah,
Okay.
in the
So
mounting
the markup
phase.
is already written.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to inject something in your markup, that's the place where you want a chart or something.
Okay, and then component did update. So this is the one that's going to be replacing most of the things that component will receive props did. Okay, so it's used in much the same way as component will receive props, but we know that that render has happened and we've got something to update it there. So yeah, that's why it's a safer method to use than will receive props. The only difference is instead of comparing with the next props, you're comparing with the previous props because the render already happened. Okay, component will mount. Any guesses?
That's the only clear one.
Yeah, so this one, it's not going to be deprecated, it's still there because we don't need to worry about the asynchronous stuff because it's right at the end, so that's when the unmount is happening. and also not use a whole lot, but you know, maybe you want to do some cleanup, get rid of some click handlers, event listeners, that kind of thing. Okay, so now we're going to look at some new methods. Get derived state from props. So that's called just after the constructor. And what does it do? It's pretty much what it says on the tin. You get a derived state from the props. So it returns an object which is merged into the state, so it's basically exactly like set state. And when would you use it? If you want to update the state in response to a change in props. Get snapshot before update. This one is used a lot less. This is kind of for maybe a really particular situation where you've got a really complicated UI with lots of different dimensions, and you need to measure something in your DOM, measure a dimension in your DOM before you make a re-render. And the classic example for this that we're going to have a little look at is if you've got a scroll box and you're adding, maybe you've got a sort of chat application, you're adding a bit of text, and you've also got your scroll thing here, and then maybe you need to preserve that position on your scroll as you're adding new text. But yeah, I'll give you a little explanation of that one. Okay, so now time for the demo. Okay, can you all see that all right over there at the back? Okay, so this is get derived state from props. We've got, in a parent component, we've got a click handler that toggles this disable, enable, and it allows you to generate a number. Oh, it should do. Okay, so that's toggling. Yeah, okay, so we can generate a number if this is set to false. And in here, in the get derived state from props, if the props is disabled, set to true, then we can update this list to refresh it with an empty array. So the prop here is disabled, and you're updating the state list. So if we click that, then the list gets refreshed to an empty array. So I can also show you example. You can also, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So if I set this to false, yeah, then we can generate this list, and then here it doesn't refresh. But if we click disable again, that's false, and the list is refreshed. And then let's have a quick look at get snapshot before update. This is a bit kind of crazy and complicated, to be honest. So basically, yeah, it's kind of being a bit of a mindfuck for me. But you've got this offset height, and that's just the height of this window. You've got the scroll top, that's just the scroll position here. And then scroll height is the whole distance between the top of the scroll and the bottom. So what get snapshot before update does, it returns a boolean, true or false, that's then passed into component did update. And then if that boolean is true, then we're going to recalculate the position of this scroll thingy. So I can show you here. Okay, so it's, yeah, sorry, I've got to scroll it down. Yeah, so this is going to be set to true if the height of that whole scroll is more than your position of the scroll. So then it knows to like move that thing down. But then if you scroll up, then it's going to return false because it's this, yeah, the scroll position just stays at the top there. Yeah, so I can show you this console log. Yeah, so we've got those being logged there. Yeah, so scroll height is more than this one in this case. Yeah, okay. Any questions about this part? No? Okay. So, yeah, if you've fallen asleep at this point, now is the time to wake up. And the key takeaway is use component did update instead of component will see props. in most cases. Otherwise, use get-derived state from props. And yeah, that's my advice for React 17. And yeah, thank you for having me. If you've got questions, ask me or follow me on Twitter.
Woo!